Right there.
You need those. Those are not swag. Those are snacks.
Those aren't swag. Everyone gets one cherry tomato.
Okay, time to pull back up the email thread for this so I remember what the hell we're talking about.
We're talking about climate change and infectious disease, I think.
Everyone gets half a cherry tomato.
I thought this was the Monster Erotica.
No.
No.
I thought this was MomoCon.
We're going to talk about things being warm and wet, but this is not the Monster Erotica panel.
I think it's a bit early for that.
It's 10 o'clock somewhere.
He's not wrong.
Okay, the time is 12:59, so I think I will do the intro. Welcome back to Science Track, everyone! I am shocked and awed that you all came to join us after all the panels we've put on, but clearly you want to learn a little bit more, even though you're on vacation. And we love that about you. So, is this getting decent sound, or should I turn this one up? Okay, great. Does anyone need to lip read? Okay. Great. Welcome to Science Track. This is the Climate Change and Infectious Disease panel. If you're instead here for Sonic the Hedgehog stuff, you should actually be down in Crystal, but I hope you're all here in the right place, and if you're not, this is going to be a fun one anyway. So we have a charity at DragonCon that we are raising money for. It is the National Alliance on Mental Health. We both have our little tiny rattle can because they ran out of actual cans. And there's a QR code, I believe, on the piece of paper in front of me, so you can also donate online without actually having to have real cash because none of us carry cash anymore.
If you're looking for seats, there are some on either end.
Raise your hand if there's a seat open near you. Great. Look for the hands.
Plenty of good seats available.
If you like what you see here, we'll be running content in this room all weekend. We will also be running some content down in Hilton Crystal Ballroom. A little bit later, we will be running, what is slightly later? We will be running LD50, The Dose Makes the Poison. And then tonight, or at 7, we'll be running Wild Butts of the Animal Kingdom. And if you want something a little bit spicier, at 10 p.m. in Hilton Grand East, we'll be running Solve for X, a nerd night variety show. And that is always a phenomenal time, but it is adult audiences suggested. Come in, find seats. There are seats. Hands up again, please. Great. Look for the hands. Go to them. They have what you need. Okay. Please put your phones on silent. We don't want any interruptions. This room will be cleared at the end of the panel. You cannot stay here for the next panel. So if you want to really go to another panel or the next panel, keep that in mind. Otherwise, this is Climate Change and Infectious Disease. I'm Liz, and let's get this party started. So I guess I'll start by letting our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, who they are, what they do, why they signed up for this. Let's start with Topher, because he's next to me.
All right, I'm Topher Hunter. Various reasons for being here, I guess. Biomedical engineer, PhD at Georgia Tech. But then I transitioned from there eventually to now I've been working for the last decade and a half in infectious disease, primarily bacterial. And I'm also a former American Red Cross disaster services responder. So.
Hi, I'm Laura Yorke. I got a master's in molecular biology from Kennesaw State. Considerably fewer woos.
Woo.
Ouch! Yeah!
Thank you. After a stint in career jail, being an Emory lab manager, I now work for a large infectious disease lab in Atlanta as a public health virologist.
Hey, I am Ben Eppstein. I'm a water resource engineer. I operate out of Texas, and there is a lot of connection between climate change, disease, and the way that we use water. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I was a cheering banana in the parade, so I am losing my voice.
Hi, I'm Charlie Kaufman. I have an environmental science background. I've got an emergency management background. I've responded to a lot of hurricanes and flooding disasters. I'm an adjunct professor at the College of Charleston, where I teach GIS, geospatial disasters, and do a lot of storm surge and flood mapping projects.
Thank you all. And also, a heads up for everyone, we will be taking questions at the end. Please, if you have any questions, save them for the end. Don't shout things out, because unless you have a mic in your face, half the room can't hear you. But we will do questions at the end. Okay, so let's get things kicked off. So when I think of climate change and infectious disease, I live in the Northeast. The first thing I think of is it's getting warmer, it's staying warmer, and there's more ticks. Do you want to, each of you talk about how is the world around us changing the disease vectors that we are being exposed to? Because I know this isn't the only example. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, so disease vectors are a huge thing to talk about in infectious disease, because it is how you acquire a disease. So when we talk about vectors in public health and infectious disease, we usually mean insect vectors. Traditionally, a vector could be like someone sneezing in your face, but vector here is insects. So mosquitoes, we all know about mosquito-borne illness. I don't know how many people here are native Georgians, but I remember when I was, probably 8 or 9, and my mom was like, West Nile virus is now a concern. And like that became a thing that I had to think about when I just hadn't learned about it before. And it's just become more and more of a constant presence. So mosquitoes are definitely a big one. I know ticks farther to the west and north are a bigger deal as well. So as the climate changes, the range of territory that these vectors are in, you really do have to eat these mics. Oh my God.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Oh, it's your fault.
As climate change.
As the climate changes, of course, the range of these vectors changes with it. We usually like a warm-ish, kind of humid, but not this humid environment. So humans also migrate with climate change. We've done it since we existed, and insects do the same thing.
The tick disease like Lyme disease, I've done field work and have gotten the bullseye rash and have had to go on the Lyme disease regimen, which is not fun. I don't recommend it. But the tick disease that scares me the most, and it used to just be like the one-off, but if you've heard of the bacteria that makes you allergic to meat, that's now becoming more prevalent everywhere because ticks are becoming more prevalent in more places. And that used to be just a rare one person would get it, and now it's becoming a thing. And I'm like, if I have to do field work now, I douse myself in more chemicals, and it's probably safe because I'm afraid of one thing and I'm poisoning myself somewhere else. So these little things are becoming more and more active, and it's getting more scary.
Hey, on the bright side, if you're allergic to meat and you have to do something, I was vegan for a year and my guts worked great.
It's like I like hamburgers.
Unfortunately, that's not, that's the symptom that we all talk about, but it's called alpha-gal syndrome, and there's actually a lot more to it than just reacting adversely to red meat, because there's alpha-gal in a lot of things you don't expect. And
what is alpha-gal?
Good question. Anyone want to take that?
It's something I don't want to get.
Well, alpha-gal is a polysaccharide, so a sugar chain molecule basically that's presented on the surface of particularly the muscle tissue in animals, particularly the ones that we raise for our red meat supply, so pigs and cattle. And there's a cross reaction between what you receive from the tick and alpha-gal. They're not the same molecule, but they're close enough that your body's immune system will confuse the two of them. And so you basically develop this very severe allergy to the alpha-gal molecule. And yeah.
And then no more red meat for you.
Right.
So my favorite animal disease that's spreading, and it's not widespread, but it's just one of the ones that you have to think about because of climate change, is like I used to live in Texas a long time ago, and if you've anyone from Texas, just out of curiosity, if they're from here, a couple people, so you live in Texas, you're used to armadillos running around, and you have to be careful with some wild armadillos because armadillos are one of the few animals that can still carry leprosy. Just don't handle a wild armadillo.
And they jump.
They also jump. You're not supposed to see an armored opossum jump.
Raise your hands if you have empty seats next to you, please. Thanks.
But with climate change, they're spreading their normal range. So I live in South Carolina now, and it's not uncommon in South Carolina to drive into work and see a dead armadillo on the side of the road, which is something. So it's just kind of like there's not a mass leprosy breakout because scientists, we all wash ourselves and take showers. Maybe not at Dragon Con, but occasionally you do. But just the fact that possibly could, like, okay, if the armadillos are spreading and armadillos are a natural carrier of leprosy, it holds standard that also is spreading farther, climate change allowing.
Man, I do not want to do field work.
Yeah,
I thought I did.
Field work is fun.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things too. Is we typically think about vector-borne illness and we think of the things that bite us, mosquitoes, ticks, but it's also the host animals that these things ride on to get close to us that are moving around. So we see things like hantavirus, which is carried by mice and it's transmitted in mouse feces. If there are more of the particular species of mice in your neighborhood and they're pooping in your home, you're at more risk of getting hantavirus, which is a
hemorrhagic fever.
Thank you. Hemorrhagic fever, which it's a cousin of Ebola and Marburg, which you probably know about, right? Bleeding from your eyes, yay, bursting.
Bad stuff. Another thing with slightly unusual vectors is, has anyone heard that there is plague in the Midwest?
Yep.
Isn't that crazy?
Is it casserole based?
It is spread through flea bites, so I don't think you could get it from a casserole, but there are other foodborne illnesses to watch out for. Refrigerate those casseroles. So it's really interesting the amount of vectors that there actually are. Fleas that bear plague, which is Yersinia pestis bacterium, are transported on prairie dogs or sometimes pet animals. So there was a case in January 2024 of a guy who had a cut in the kitchen and then interacted with his cat who was infected with plague, and he had to go on like IV antibiotics and stuff to survive the plague infection. So yeah, and that's out of season. Plague really is a summer illness, like a lot of things.
Hot plague summer.
Hot plague summer. So be careful when you're interacting with pet animals in the Midwest, or if you have like roaming dogs, or if you don't pet a prairie dog, wash your hands.
This is a personal anecdote, but Charlie brought up Texas. So when we were thinking about this panel the other day, I was thinking about West Nile because we're weird and we do that, and I got a message on my phone that was notifying me that they'd found another positive West Nile virus in a trapped mosquito near our house, and I was just kind of scrolling up, and it was, I think, the 22nd I've gotten this year alone. So it's something we're all experiencing.
And then there's, to continue the variety of different sources of these things, we have things like soil-borne, particularly fungi, so histoplasmosis, coccidiosis, all these fungi that are typically growing in the soil, and then when something, say a drought, and then you till the dry soil, kicks it up into the air, we inhale it, or it gets into our wounds, and suddenly we get these nasty fungal infections. And fungal infections are incredibly difficult to treat.
Yeah, fun fact, antiparasitics and antifungals hurt things in the cells that are similar to the things in your cells. So they are harder to use in high doses and also have more side effects when you do. So fungal infections and parasites are really difficult to treat. So wear those gardening gloves.
That's
now that we've depressed all of you.
Don't we love science?
So we have all of these vectors. Is this because the climate change is making the animals move, or is this because climate change is letting them exist in places where they couldn't? Is it a mix? Is there a third option going on here?
I think it's letting them move, and part of it is because it's staying warmer longer in places, so they're expanding their range. They're like, hey, so like fire ants being the bane of my existence, they're growing in places. My backyard is a mass of fire ant mounds right now, and fire ants were not native. They're not supposed to be in South Carolina, and they are. They're everywhere. So they're because they can exist. They're moving their range up. They're getting further and further north. They're not supposed to do that. So as the climate gets warmer and they can adapt and survive, and they're like, South Carolina used to have a hard freeze. We don't anymore. So they're moving up. And as that's moving up, other species are coming with it and the diseases they carry, and it's growing. So that's adapting, and they're going further. So I think it's because as it's getting warmer, that's allowing the ranges to expand.
I think it's a mix of both. I think that there are some places that are getting so hot, or the ocean is getting so acidified, which is maybe a different issue, that the vectors can't survive anymore. Or like in places where it's drying instead of wetting, mosquitoes can't survive. I think we have a confluence of factors here.
Yeah, but speaking of ocean changes, I mean, we're also seeing changes in the bugs that are in the water.
Yeah.
And, tropical bugs that would typically grow in tropical waters are moving further north and south.
Are there any fun diseases that they carry?
Well, there is a whole category of diseases called neglected tropical diseases, because traditionally they're overlooked, considering they happen in places like Africa and Central America, where resources haven't been spent as widely to track and treat these diseases. So I think that the neglected tropical diseases are becoming the oh crap tropical diseases.
And if you've ever seen or experienced or breathed next to a red tide, that's not fun, and those are coming more and more as well.
What's so dangerous about a red tide?
So the red tide, the little guys that are growing in the red tide are sucking up all the oxygen, and then they are sticking out little bacteria and whatnot. And if you're immunocompromised, or you have poor breath, or you can't get it in, that gets into your lungs, and it is metallic and it burns. And most people just go, yeah, that tastes funny, and you go in and you're fine. But if it gets in there, it's harsh, and people have to go in, and it's almost like a bad air quality index, and you have to get away from the ocean, and you have to get inside the air conditioning, and you have to wait for nature will eventually cycle that out, but it takes a while. And if that hits you on the beach on your vacation week, you're doomed.
So pay attention to those alerts.
Ben, did you have something? Sorry. Did you have something?
Oh, no.
I didn't want to step on you. Another thing that's worth looping in is right, as we're seeing climate change, that's displacing human populations. Those human populations are then moving into areas that maybe had much lower density populations previously, so they're coming into contact with more wild animals, and we're getting zoonotic diseases. So diseases that are jumping from, say, a bat to a human, or from a civet cat to a human, or wherever the heck COVID came from in the latest theories.
There's another concern with this as well, with these human populations mixing, is there are diseases that some populations are resistant to, either through vaccines, we love vaccines, or through historical immunity, or like exposure. Like some populations were more immune to smallpox, and some were not when America was colonized, and that caused a huge die-off of people from illness. And so that can cause the same thing with something like measles in populations who maybe are not immunized, or just don't have historical contact with the virus. So things like that can cause very large, unprecedented outbreaks.
On that lovely note, so we did briefly touch on winters being warmer, or not as hard freezes as we want, summers being warmer and wetter. So besides making critters move around, how else can these changes in weather patterns cause diseases to spread? I know, Ben, you had some specific commentary about storms and what that might do to the wastewater system.
Yeah, so this is the part where we talk about poop. It's my favorite part.
Woo!
Yay, poop. Yep, she likes it. No. So yeah, like as storm cycles, as winter storms, tropical storms, as all these cycles start to get more and more intense, it is heavily straining our current infrastructure. And a lot of that infrastructure, especially the way that we treat our waste and the way that we clean our drinking water, is vitally important to prevent us from getting diseases.
Do you think that infrastructure requires like regular maintenance to stay functional, or?
Yes, and do you think that costs money and needs funding?
Oh,
So when it rains really heavy, because like I live in New York and we've had some pretty severe flooding events, and I see people like wading through knee-deep water to get into the subway or to cross the street. So not that I stay home because I have the privilege to do that. But what are people being exposed to when this happens, and why? Like, isn't it just rainwater?
So there's going to be things in the rainwater, and I'll kick it over to this side of the table in a second for that. But when we have these large storming events, we have quite a bit of backup in our systems, and there are quite extensive forensic studies that go into, for instance, I was reading one a year or two ago that was looking at tropical storms that were hitting the city of New York, and it was quantifying just how much wastewater backed up on the streets, in the sewers, in the rivers, in the areas that people were having to wade through in the subways. That's not great.
Do you think there's a evolutionary reason that we do not like to walk through poo water?
The icky factor?
And it spreads disease. So one of the huge things, obviously, for floods and storms is that if the sewers backed up, the streets are full of poo. And nobody wants to be in the poo. That's why we separate it with water infrastructure. So this can cause anything from breathing in pathogens rotaviruses, noroviruses, ungodly bacteria. There's just a very wide range of issues that this can cause. Most of them involve being in the toilet for a very long amount of time, and very severe dehydration is actually one of the main causes of death for children in the world. And diarrheal disease is a huge driver of those diseases.
The other flip to that is, having done a lot of hurricane response, and I've map flooding and storm surge for my real world job. When you have massive flood events, either if it's just from a rainstorm or from a hurricane or any type of flooding event, it's not the fact that you have people walking through water, which always wigs me out when I see it. It's not the fact that the sewers are overflowing, and most people don't realize it's if the street's overflowing, if you just get a gentle rain, if you ever notice that fun weird shimmery rainbow effect, that's just all the oil and nasty chemical stuff. The storm sewers that are on the side, that's just storm rainwater waste. By the time it backs up the sewers, that's when the wastewater is starting to pile up, and that's when you're going to pick up the diseases. What really scares me is if the storm is very bad, when you wipe out your water treatment plant, you've stopped your ability to make fresh water. So by the time you've gotten the disease that's causing you to have massive diarrhea, you no longer have a fresh water supply to rehydrate yourself. And that's when the disease really takes effect, because you've prevented your community from producing the fresh water that you desperately need to come out of your tap, because you've got, as the water everywhere but I can't drink in of it scenario, that really starts to scare us all.
Yeah, and kind of thinking of it from a different angle here, flooding is not the only issue that we see dealing with climate change. I know in Texas in 2021, we had that big ice storm roll through, Winter Storm Yuri, and Ted Cruz went to Cancun, all that stuff. Yeah.
Does this also have something to do with infrastructure?
Yes, yeah. But the main issue, and this is true for flooding as well, is power. When you have huge natural disasters like that, your ability to get safe, reliable power, especially at these treatment plants, kind of goes out the back door. And once you lose power, you are not able to do the processes that we rely on to produce clean drinking water. Very quickly, we lose pressure in the system, and that's when you start seeing boil water notices go out.
And for a public health angle, another issue with power outages is heat going out. Older people who just maybe have weaker health in general, it's really difficult to live without heat, especially somewhere like Texas where you're not expecting it. There's big problems in the UK right now because most of them don't have central air conditioning. Now, I'm from Georgia. I was born in Kennesaw, live in Marietta now. It's so I've had central air my entire life. Until I went to college in New York, I didn't even know that not having central air was an option. So there's a lot of issues with the heat waves in the UK and obviously a lot of other areas. That's just where it's being publicized. But there's just many, many angles to these more extreme events.
Yeah, and if I could just impart one tidbit of wisdom to the group, when you build something, when you build infrastructure, you don't build it for these 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 chance events. You build it for the way it's going to be ran most of the year. So when these extreme weather events hit, it's like literally not designed to withstand an event like that.
How many 1 in 100-year events have we had recently?
Lots.
Too many. But that's the deal, is we're having to go back to the books and we're having to start recalculating the frequency of these weather events.
Topher, you've been pretty quiet. You look like you got something to say.
Well, building on what's been said, there's also these events stress the healthcare system, the infrastructure and resources, right? Your EMTs are all tapped out. Your hospitals are absolutely overloaded. If you, say, change the way the census is run so that you only count citizens, you're not going to build hospitals big enough to handle all the people in that area.
Or in all the places that they need to be.
Right. And so, if particularly, without getting too much into politics, we're not supposed to, but if you're redistributing resources in a ill thought out way, it's actually going to make these places more vulnerable because they're going to have fewer resources that are going to then be stretched further.
Do you think that will also make things more expensive?
Yeah.
And we can move away from it kind of after this, but like drinking water treatment, wastewater treatment, those consume a lot of materials. Those use a lot of chemicals. So these extreme weather events, they disrupt the supply chain, and you're not always able to get those supplies that you desperately need.
Especially if one of those events happens in a place where there's chemicals being produced. Like we had I don't know if you guys were, for the Atlanta people, you'll know that there was a fire at a company called BioLab earlier this year, and we had an air quality cloud, like a cloud of chlorine over the city. I actually couldn't go to work for a few days because I have asthma. And yeah, because they were a chlorine making plant. And so if you have a big weather event, I'm not going to say rare because they're no longer that way, but if it impacts chemical manufacturing infrastructure, things like that, you can also have a biological or chemical hazard along with it. And that will really strain the emergency response.
Yeah, and last year we saw this fascinating event where the hurricane went up through and trashed the Carolinas, and it happened to hit the one Baxter plant that manufactures approximately 60% of the saline fluid for medical use in the United States. 60%. Interestingly, about another 25% is manufactured in South Georgia, and about 2 weeks after, there was a hurricane that went right by it and came very close to wiping out that plant as well.
Did we do something to make the universe mad?
Charlie?
And just saying, having tasted or drank some of the emergency water rations that's been dropped that comes in like now water in a box is like marketed, but having some of the emergency water in the box or have to drink the water that's been purified with actual bleach, it's potable but not something you want to live on for a long time. So as a society, we are really dependent on fresh, clean water that keeps us healthy and away and protected from all these diseases we're discussing. So
yeah, we keep a pack of dehydrated water in our office.
Yeah,
just add water.
Yeah,
So I have a question. These storms come through, and for example, I get a lot of water that passes by my house, and I have a spot in my basement that always gets kind of damp. And I know that that's probably not great, but it's under control. But if there was a substantially bigger storm, there'd probably be a lot more damp. What does that do when it happens on a big scale to people and their health?
Well, one big issue is mold. It can come in fungal infections, like you mentioned earlier, or just spores can cause respiratory distress. And that's a long-term problem. Mold is hard to get rid of.
Kind of circling back to that first topic we hit on, when you have more rain events, when you have more standing water, that provides a breeding ground for things like mosquitoes. It's like, if you talk to your local public health organizations, they'll tell you, like, if you're dealing with West Nile, you put mosquito dunks or you put treatment options if you have standing water that you keep in your backyard, or try to eliminate those sources altogether.
Yeah, summer reminder to dump all your plant potter bottoms.
and drywall and gypsum acts like a sponge. So if you get water in your house that's standing around long enough, all your drywall and gypsum will just suck it straight up. And so you may have only had an inch of water, but if it's there long enough, you're going to replace your entire sheets. Now, there's a rule of thumb in the emergency management world. If you look around, have anybody ever wondered why your electrical outlets are so many inches, like 6 inches off the ground? A lot of insurance companies, and I don't know what FEMA does now, if it exists anymore, but they say if you got water up to your electrical outlets for a certain amount of time, your house is almost considered a total loss because your gypsum and drywall have had enough time to suck and get to the roof.
Man, imagine totaling your house.
Yeah, so water inside your house, because it's had enough time now, because it's dried out, you don't have any power, you can't turn your AC on, your mold and fungus and everything else that's nasty. The last thing in the world you want to do is go, oh, everything's dry, I'll turn it back on. You put a hammer into your drywall and it's black mold behind it.
I think one point that we're kind of have been reinforcing is that climate change and infectious disease are very interconnected topics, but they're also very interconnected with other things like water systems, emergency response, public health, and infrastructure. We actually didn't talk a lot about the impact of infrastructure in our email chain, but we seem to have arrived at it naturally.
Oh.
What a thing.
Are we going to start talking about the news?
No news.
No. The NWSS.
Oh!
What is the NWSS?
The good news. This is the poo water tracking system.
Tell me more. I love hearing about poo.
National wastewater surveillance system. Yeah, so it's a national database of different sites of water plants or public health sites that have dedicated infrastructure to do testing of different samples from their wastewater system, either before or after treatment. To see, well, I guess treatment, that would just be quality, but before treatment to see if there are like diseases spreading that shed in the poo, which is a lot of them actually.
That's such a crappy job. Somebody had to say it.
Yeah. There are a lot of diseases that even though they're not dominant, so like COVID, it's not dominant in the intestinal tract, it's not really something that can be transmitted from person to person via feces. There are lots of other things that can, so don't, but there's still enough of it in our fecal material that it can be detected.
Yeah. Do you guys, sorry.
No, good.
Do you guys think of polio as a neurological disease? Polio is a poo disease. It's a gut infection, and we can detect it. We actually detect new polio outbreaks through wastewater surveillance. It's really interesting. So, wash those hands.
And this really didn't exist at scale before COVID. It's environmental microbiology is the field that really kind of dives into this. A lot of work had been done to start talking about that, but when COVID emerged, it really kind of lit the fire that allowed the CDC to start implementing this at scale.
Why'd you look at me when you said CDC? I didn't say where I work.
I'm looking down.
One of my bosses is here. So.
When COVID broke out and they started realizing they could do that, one of my early COVID mappings that I made for when I was emergency management work was we were getting information, and so we could track the spread of like, oh, this city is getting, hotspot analysis, and we're like, where are you getting this information from? And I'm like, well, poo. It's not something you tell the public. Or like, we're looking at the sewer. It's like
we're looking at your poo.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned hotspots. So what kind of data do we get out of a program like this?
So much data. A lot of it is actually site-specific, where we can track outbreaks. So in COVID, it was used to say like, oh, this community, I didn't work on COVID, but from what I read, it was like, oh, this community has higher transmission. There's more like, it's called viral shedding or bacterial shedding when you like emit a microbe in some way. It can happen through urine, like your respiratory secretions, poo, sexual transmission is a thing, but it's before 10 p.m. And so we were able to track, because a lot of viruses are shed in the poo, like you said, and in pee. Urine shedding is also tracked through this. We're able to see like where there are hot spots or more hits on the testing than other places, and then you could be like, oh, we need more resources or test here or there. So it's been a really useful tool, and I do think there is something to be said about that like COVID was awful and it changed the world forever, and like things have just kind of sucked after it. But if there's one thing that was good, it's that environmental microbiology and public health really, really got funding and became a resource that we now use for many other outbreaks.
And it's not a new thing. We've been doing this
just got money now.
Yeah, and we've been doing this for years. Like as a map maker, we all have to read this. There's a novel called The Ghost Map, and it's about the cholera outbreak in London way back in the day. And these two people, a naturalist is what they called environmental scientists back then. All these people were dying in London from cholera, and a minister at the same time was pissed off because half of his parishioners were dying. So both people worked at it at the same time, and they basically walked around this neighborhood and were knocking on doors and going, how many people died in your house today? And they both started just making tick marks of the addresses, and they both got together at one point and they got a city street map and started blacking out houses, and they worked all the way around in a spiral pattern, and they got to the point where they went, everybody lives at this well. Yeah. And then they walked up to the well and they just yanked it out of the ground and said, people need to stop drinking out of this. And the minute they took the well out, the cholera epidemic started to die off. And it was still too early for them to realize that maybe this water's, but they said, if people stop drinking from this, maybe we'll stop the outbreak. And so it's an early way that they were tracking disease from a source. And it's really cool, like they were putting it together. So we've been tracking diseases from this type for a long time.
That single event was the birth of epidemiology.
Yes.
Yeah. It was involved in the birth of statistics and of clinical research science. Yeah. All three stemmed largely from that one thing.
And the map is really cool, so all the GIS people have to read the book and look at it. So
I've had that book on my TBR since one of your panels last year, so maybe now I'll actually read it.
Now, it's hard to get really specific data out of something like the NWSS because you don't know a lot of variables. Like it's used at a really high level planning kind of purpose.
Population average.
Yeah. An analogy that I heard once that was really good is imagine you're inside a car on a train, okay, and it's moving. You don't know how fast you're going when you're inside that train car, but you can feel it accelerating and decelerating. That's kind of the gist we get out. We see increases in viral shedding through a surveillance program like that. You can't really tell how many cases that's attached to, but you can see changes in the trends of the data.
Absolutely. That's a bit of a downside with some surveillance data like this where it's aggregated and pooled. There are very strict regulations called CLIA around diagnostic. The Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments of 1980?
Something like that, yeah.
Don't tell my team lead, I couldn't remember. But basically there are extremely strict regulations over diagnostic testing so that you don't get misdiagnosed with something. The paperwork is heinous, but that's the price we pay for good diagnostics. Surveillance is not beholden to these standards in the same way because we don't track to a case level in the same way, and you don't report it back to the patient in the same way. So we're able to use this data in a research and surveillance capacity to be we think that this area will need more resources soon, or this area might request help soon. It's not being, as far as I know, it's not being used on a huge scale yet, but it has dramatically increased, and I do think that it's useful as a tool for pinpointing when an outbreak is rising. You can see, so it depends on how quickly the data is entered into the system on whether you can catch it beforehand, but it's often used as a back-looking tool, which is also useful.
And something else they had to figure out when they started this program was who owns your poop. Because when you participate in a medical study, there's a lot of regulation that goes into that, and there are a lot of protections for you as someone who is participating in that program.
It's because you're identifiable with the samples usually.
I think when they really started rolling out the NWSS, they made a determination that pretty much the city has full rights to use whatever waste you give them at that point.
Have fun pooping.
Yeah, I know. So they kind of had to skip. They got to skip over a lot of that red tape that you normally have to.
This is Dragon Con. We're all sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. So I'm sure most of the audience has read or knows about Foundation, right? So psychohistory was basically, right, the idea is you can predict broad-scale societal changes, but you can't predict an individual. Hey,
Epidemiology.
yeah, you're able to predict and look at large-scale changes, but you have no idea if Bob down the street actually has a particular condition.
Exactly.
And one fun aside with this, if you've ever, anybody ever taken a tour of a sewage treatment plant, or just a couple of you, there are two.
Wash your hands.
Where do I sign up?
Yeah, there are two probably a few more, but two plants, their seeds can make it through the entire process. If you go and you go to a lot of times they'll have these big fields where they'll just spread the dry waste out to dry, and they'll sell it to farmers for free fertilizer, especially in the rural areas. And I was talking to the guy because you looked at this field and there's this bumper crop of plants growing in there, and there's two plants that the seeds can make it through the entire process and make it out to the field and dry and grow, and it's tomatoes and pot.
And on that
It was
lovely
the
note.
greatest, largest, healthiest looking tomatoes with giant things. And right next to it was the healthiest looking pot. And I asked the guy, I'm like, what do you do? He goes, oh, we sell this to the farmers for their fields. I'm like, do you warn them?
Do you tell them what
and
it
he goes,
is?
well, sometimes some of our workers put on waiters from the fishing store and they go out and harvest the tomatoes. I'm like, I bet that's not all they're harvesting, I was like, can you imagine explaining to the DEA agent? It was like, no, I bought this fertilizer from those. I don't know where this stuff started growing.
I'm hearing invest in the pizza industry right now.
Yeah.
So,
Smart man.
Tomatoes.
so we've talked a lot about how we track disease, what diseases are moving around, what's coming for us, what's trying to eat us or kill us. Is there anything positive here? Is there any successes we've had against these various viral vectors? Like, I remember growing up, there was a whole West Nile outbreak in the New York area, and then they sprayed a whole lot, and it beat back the West Nile, but it also killed a bunch of lobsters. Have we had some better outcomes or approaches, or do we have things coming down the pipeline that can make me a little less scared of, say, going birding and coming back with a tick bite that makes me unable to eat red meat?
Give us some wins.
Well, the development of RNA-based vaccines was huge, and it gives us a completely new tool for fighting off some of these diseases because it can be rapidly adapted and rapidly grown. Like the first COVID RNA vaccine was developed, they had it in hand within 2 weeks or something of sequencing the genome.
That's because scientists have been working for 40 years on mRNA technology, and so it was really an excellent confluence of events that allowed us to have a breakthrough at the right time, along with an infusion of $1 billion or something, literally. Because when you fund science and you fund scientists, our stuff costs a lot. The antibodies I use for my research project are $600 for 100 microliters. We're throwing around money because we can. The companies price them that way.
It's also worth pointing out that COVID was unusual in that we had this massive population that we could test on, and
yes,
normally you're testing on a very rare condition, and so we look at everybody, nobody got it. Well, statistically, maybe nobody was going to get it anyway. But in the case of COVID, we had this giant population and a disease that was ripping through. So it was an ideal situation for developing these clinical studies.
Yeah. Also, I'm married to a scientist that works in clinical research. This is the most transparent study in human history. It was the COVID vaccine.
Very good point.
And mine's kind of a double-edged sword. We've had these bigger, stronger, scarier hurricanes and storms, but the technology to forecast and study and monitor these bigger, stronger, scarier storms has leaps and bounds. The forecasting has gotten amazingly better. The satellite data and the predictive modeling has gotten ridiculously better than where it has been. When I'm looking at a storm and looking at the forecast tracks or pulling in a radar scope, from where it was even as far back as Katrina has been just massively bigger. It's almost like we don't want to be able to do this, but it's cool that we can. So,
and even a day of notification on a hurricane makes a huge difference for evacuation and for those who can, and accommodating people who have a rougher time. Like if you have an extra day or an extra 2 days, it makes a huge difference in public health and the amount of people you can help.
To give an example, for Charleston, South Carolina is where I work. It takes 72 hours to do a complete coastal evacuation of the area, and that's with not everybody listening, getting in the car, driving like they're supposed to, and leaving, and that's able-bodied. If you've got to get rid of the hospitals and the nursing homes and everyone else that would have trouble, you're adding another day and a half on top of that. So that's almost a full week before the storm is even, the sun is still, it's a beautiful day like this when we're telling people to get out of their homes, but we know it's coming. So to have that extra time, and we know it's a huge amount of preparedness. So the fact that we're able to do that is a huge bonus.
And that climate data, it's coming from NASA, it's coming through NOAA, and we rely on...
And it's coming from the military.
Yeah.
We're getting...
And we rely on products that are being released every month, every few weeks in order to make these decisions.
And collaborations with other countries. Like the only reason weather forecasting exists is that we have collaborations around the world, and we're all like, okay, so I see this data now, and I see this data. We put it all into some giant... Have you heard the American model and the European model? They're two gigantic weather predictive models that are just incredibly impressive in scope. The last hurricane that almost hit the United States coast in the Atlantic, Aaron, I saw the way it was gonna go 8 days out, or 8 or 9 days out. Yeah, that is unprecedented.
They called that beautifully, and I was just like, whew.
Yeah, there are... Oh, my phone locked. We do have some more wins.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know in the past, for example, we've pushed back certain disease vectors. Malaria was eliminated in the United States, many decades ago. For a while, screwworm was eliminated, but that's beginning to make a comeback. But are there other vectors we've pushed back, pushed out of range, or in other ways made not a threat?
So there is a project for, if anyone has heard of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, we're all nerds in this room, so I see a lot of you nodding. That is the mosquito that transmits the parasite that causes malaria, along with other mosquito-borne diseases as well. There are programs to sterilize those mosquitoes by introducing infertile males to the population, and then that allows that population to either die down or die out. We're actually already doing that in California, I think, and in some Central American areas. One of the wins is that 108 of 194 WHO member countries are malaria-free as of July, which is incredibly impressive for the disease that has killed more people, we think, than anything except maybe tuberculosis.
Do any of the other panelists have some wins they want to share? Oh no.
I have the wins document. Clean energy, like wind and solar power, have seen huge growth in the last 3 years, and several states and countries are getting most or all of their energy from clean or renewable sources, which is a win, because we could go on another panel talking about why.
Yeah.
But slowing down climate change by slowing down, CO2 is definitely going to help stop the problem, because all of this is coming from the climate is changing and things are happening that shouldn't, or at least previously weren't happening.
Yeah, so we can slow it with that. Tangentially related, but just a really cool new discovery is that a new drug for long-lasting HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis was approved in the U.S. last month. Yay! And so it's a twice-yearly injection for PrEP and for treatment. So that's just, HIV is a virus that just mutates a lot. It's very difficult to catch. We're in an arms race with it. So that was just very, very happy thing.
It's a good sign that we are continuing to develop new technologies in medicine that might also let us deal with some of these disease vectors that climate change is pushing on us.
Yes, exactly. And the last one that I have is that the measles outbreak that was ongoing in West Texas was declared over a few weeks ago. So I believe 3 people, 2 children, and an adult did die from that. But so measles is an ongoing issue. Vaccines are good, but that outbreak was declared over by the Texas Department of Public Health. So always a good thing to have an outbreak over.
Looks like you want to say something. Okay. Then I think it is time to hand things over to the audience. Do people have questions? Okay, so here is how it's going to work. Oh, sorry.
Or just a few questions.
A few questions. So our volunteer is going to hold the mic. You do not take the mic from them. The mic is simply presented to you. Similar to these mics, it has to be very close to your face. Otherwise, it will not pick you up. And if you're not picked up, half the room can't hear you. I do encourage our panelists to repeat the question. And these should be questions. They should be short. They should fit in, 100 characters or so. And it should end in a question mark. So please, no comments, just questions. And we're going to try to move around the room and hit different sections. So take it away.
Okay, I'm going to start here. Hello. So with all these wins and all this and all the money that we got from COVID and all these good things that we're getting, without going deeper, it's just with the changes happening right now, what is the future actually look like? And with all this, how can we keep ahead of with information
So the question was, how do we keep ahead of things, and what is it going to look like in the future for this? Because we need money for this research, and that is becoming more difficult to get. I think we have to hold on to hope. As scientists, we will continue to work until we can't, and we just have to, support scientists and just do our best.
Yeah, call your Congress people. Make sure they know that you support funding for these organizations, for the research work that's done. The more phone calls they get, the better, the more they realize it's an issue for them.
From the public works side, it's the same deal. The second you build something, it starts to... There we go. I'm saying from the public works side, it's the same deal. The second you build something, it starts to deteriorate and crumble. If we're not spending money on infrastructure, we are
and maintaining the infrastructure.
We are losing ground. If there's ever periods where we stop infrastructure building, there's literally a doomsday clock that someone's made somewhere that's counting to midnight.
Next question.
Hi, I'm a pediatrician, and since the COVID pandemic, we've had RSV rampaging through the summer instead of the winter. Do you know if anyone's come up with an explanation for that?
I think part of it is that RSV was previously lumped in with flu in a category called influenza-like illness, and so now that we've separated it out, we being just scientists in general, there's been separation and a diagnostic test developed specifically for RSV that is more widely used now. I think that it's just being tracked better, and summer colds happen, and I think that those are being tracked better as RSV. I think that's at least a small part of it. As far as switching seasons, seasonality of diseases is incredibly complicated. A lot of the fact that we have a winter respiratory season is people being packed inside, but the summer infectious disease season is as significant because of travel. So I think that there was a boost in travel after COVID, people going on vacations they had missed, people having weddings they missed. My big wedding was in 2024. There's a lot of factors there.
And being packed inside because of air conditioning, because there's a heat event, is really the same as being packed inside because it's cold.
Or packed inside because there's wildfire smoke now spreading to the Northeast because of uncontained wildfires in Canada, which is also a product of climate change.
So I think it's climate change.
Next question.
Do you think that building infrastructure in previous permafrost regions, as humans migrate to these now habitable areas, will bring up pathogens that we haven't seen before? And how much, if any, concern should that be?
So I grew up in Alaska. We have seen previously undescribed viruses and bacteria coming out of the thawing permafrost. To my knowledge, to date, none of them have been identified as pathogenic, so disease-causing organisms. But they're going to come.
Yeah. And that is just a very difficult environment to build things in. So the more we expand out, the more we have to go into these areas. That's going to present additional troubles.
To give you a window into the mind of a scientist, my first thought was, I hope so, because I want to look at them.
Next
You move
question.
out there.
Yeah, we talked a lot about infectious disease of humans and how it affects us directly. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about infectious disease of livestock and plants that we depend on.
This is a huge one. I don't know if you guys know that we have a different banana than our grandparents did, because it was vulnerable to a fungal infection due to lack of genetic diversity. Our current bananas and a lot of our crops are monocultures of the same genetic material, and that leaves them very, very vulnerable to infection. So I don't know, man. I think we need more scientists to work on that.
A lot of our crops are even all just the same species, right? Brassica is a huge number of different vegetables in the store. And, wheat, well, we use a whole bunch of different wheat and we call it a different thing.
It's the same bloody species.
We're also having hotter, wetter summers during the growing season, causing more fungal outbreaks in our crops that these plants, even with genetic diversity, just didn't evolve to deal with this. And now they're staying hotter, wetter. You're getting all sorts of rusts and powdery mildew and similar issues on these plants we rely on to eat. We've also been seeing changes in bird migratory patterns, which is causing some interesting intersections between our migrating birds, like geese, and our cattle populations.
Yeah. I think this is a great question and really a huge problem we're going to face in the future.
I assume there's another question. I just can't see our... Okay, great. Go for it.
Hey, quick question about the wastewater coverage that has been being done since COVID, which is fantastic. How do they decide, or what actually decides what to be looking for in that wastewater? Because you can't look for everything. So is there a formulation or something to decide what to look for?
I think that a lot of it is based on the outbreaks that are ongoing, but to be totally honest, my impression is that a lot of it has to do with funding, which I know is very surprising. But things, I think there's polio, measles, COVID, RSV, and I think a few others on NWSS right now. But it really depends on what is being funded, what is being looked at, what the sites are able to test for, and what they're willing to test for.
And these are happening near the big population centers because of funding, and also that's a more effective collection point.
That's a really good point. We might not be appropriately covering more rural areas with hospitals, public health, and wastewater tracking.
Yep.
Next question.
If we had a new organization of volunteers that were going to start a new NGO to help with disaster relief and emergency management, what is the most critical thing that we're missing right now with these up-and-coming threats? What does FEMA and the local OEMs and the Red Cross and Team Rubicon, what do they not have right now? Would it be helpful to have someone handing out PPE? Would it be helpful to have someone giving out tetanus shots after a flood? What would be the most helpful right now?
Honestly, it's funding and communication. The last thing you want to do is respond into a disaster with people not knowing. We've had that problem. The locals, it's different. People think FEMA needs to run in and do everything, and every disaster is run by the local. So I worked for a state emergency management office, but if the disaster hit, it was run by the local ground zero. The state supported the local. FEMA supported the state. All of those NGOs supported the state, which is supported down. We absolutely hated when these organizations would come in and say, we're here to help, and we didn't know who or what they were. And the other thing that was always, we called it a disaster within a disaster, was when Good Samaritans, with all the hope and love in their heart, would roll up with a semi-truck full of stuff to donate, and we're like, well, we don't have a place for this, and they'd be like, well, we're here to donate all these things, and we're like, well, we weren't expecting you, and we don't have a place for it. So money's always easy, because then we can give it to the people who need it, and if you're going to sign up, let us know you're coming. Believe me, they will put you to work if they know you're coming, but communicate with the local authorities, and let them know. But that was always the biggest problem, is that people came in. The worst disaster within a disaster with 9/11, and it breaks my heart, is the news report said that all the rescue dogs were cutting their feet on the debris, and so all the people in the world donated almost 2 tractor trailers of the dog like foot pads. Nobody told them they were coming, and so they rolled into New York City and were trying to give them out, and there was like in the middle of all that, like it was this massive disaster that like, and it was, you know, out of the goodness of people's hearts, but that happens all the time. People see on the news, they're like, well, I'm going to help. They organize these clothing drives and something, or like,
yeah, I think emergency response is always in collaboration with local government.
Yeah, it is.
So
I was just we should move quickly through this because we have a couple more
so
questions.
a government
Ben had some. You finish yours and then we'll go to Ben and then we'll go to Topher.
Just a government agency always comes in with the invitation of a local government. So if you, or state public health. So if you want to help or have something, you have to collaborate with the local authorities.
And I was just going to say money and a willingness not to stigmatize certain topics. It used to be man-made climate change versus climate change. Now I feel like more and more we're having to walk people through that climate change is a thing and that they can accept it without it attacking their political beliefs.
Okay, next question.
You had talked about more mold in the home as things get damper, as things get warmer. I am someone who does not use my central AC, so that I am used to the warmer temperatures when heat waves hit. Would you think that it is worse to be not used to the warmer temperatures or the mold that is growing in my home, because obviously central AC dehumidifies as well?
I do think dehumidification is like a good thing for especially like Georgia. Like, I don't know if you live here, but like, oh my God, the humidity is so bad. I think it just really depends on your situation, what conditions you're putting up with. You know, you can test for mold and stuff like that, but it's definitely a lot of factors that depend on what you prefer.
Good on you for doing that. I always try, you know, it's better for the grid, it's better for a whole bunch of other things that we're dealing with as well.
You're stronger than I am.
Yeah.
One more lightning question.
So you were talking about Aedes aegypti as an invasive species in Georgia. It's been here a couple hundred years, but it started out in Africa. How do we deal with the invasive species problem that we have between global transportation as well as climate change, allowing them to expand to more places?
And keep your thoughts quick because we got to cut real soon.
We're actually talking about this a bit on the email chain. Invasive species are a huge problem, not only for public health, but for also like the native species. And I think, again, it's going to require like collaboration, vigilance, funding. There are a lot of programs out there that have tried to take care of invasive species by introducing another species, and it inevitably, something goes very, very wrong. So just being careful of the environment, like, I don't have necessarily an answer, but I do think that like hope, funding, you know, citizen science, doing what you can is really the answer to a lot of these.
Communication, keep like garden centers from selling stuff that's not native to your area.
Anything else? Any last comments? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up.
Native species use less water, so consider using native species.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us. This has been a fantastic panel. Thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists who were like super active in getting prepped for this as well. There were so many emails. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm. I love you all joining us. If you want more science content, you can continue in this room after we clear it. We'll be going all day. We also have in Grand Crystal Ballroom, we have Dose Makes the Poison at 10 p.m. We have Solve for X, and please rate us in the app. Rate us and review us if you liked it, if you didn't like it. The feedback is super helpful for making sure we can get resources from DragonCon to keep doing this. In addition, if you have thoughts or comments that you want to submit beyond what the feedback lets you do, if you have thoughts on what might make a good panel, scan the QR codes that we have on it's like there's one by the door. They're by the door. And you can submit some additional feedback to us, donate to the charity. Otherwise, have a nice day. You can ask a few more questions of our panelists until they got to run. And thanks for joining us.
West Nile, yeah. I was reading a paper about West Nile earlier. Sorry about that.